Imagine a man. Imagine a man building a machine. Now imagine that machine being used to create a monster. Is Frankenstein the monster or the victim? We're going to figure that out today on Comicology. To understand Frankenstein, you have to understand people in general, why they are the way that they are. You have to take a person and then break them down to their component parts. You have skin, you have organs, perhaps there's a brain in there somewhere. Now imagine if you took those parts and you removed them. Imagine if you took them and you traded them, exchanged them. Does that fundamentally change the man? If a man can remove his brain, his heart, if he can remove his skin, and exchange it for something else entirely, is he still that same man? Or has he become something different? Has he become a monster? This is sort of the moral question at the heart of Frankenstein. Essentially, the story revolves around this doctor, and this doctor, he doesn't really view humans as being particularly special. In fact, he views us more like machines. We are made of parts which can be harvested and exchanged for different purposes. This doctor is, of course, Dr. Frankenstein. He has perfected a method of keeping dead tissue alive or even reanimating dead tissue after it's already been disposed of. And he uses this scientifically advanced technique to build what he considers to be the perfect man out of body parts that he's harvested from several locations. And as a result, it can only be described as a monster. As we can see from this cover of today's issue, Frankenstein is immediately enthralled with and disgusted by his own creation, which is large and lumbering and unattractive, but also indeed very powerful. In the end, the good doctor learned a valuable lesson, but he learned it too late, that humans are more than just the sum of their parts. Without a soul, they are nothing but machines destined to failure. But will his creation suffer the same fate, or will he be shown to be wiser than even his own creator? The monster of Frankenstein is a powerful being of great strength. He is capable of lifting up to 20,000 pounds. He is also supremely durable. It is nearly impossible to hurt him with any conventional weapons, such as knives or clubs. He does not feel pain. And he has a basic healing factor that takes care of small wounds. He also never gets tired due to an enhanced cardiovascular system. And finally, he is completely immune to diseases. Likewise, the monster could never have been brought to life without a spark of nature to get him going. In this case, that spark of nature comes from a bolt of electricity. It's the very force which allows his body to function, and as a result, his body acts like a sort of battery. Exposure to electricity supercharges his abilities. Then on the other end of the spectrum, we have the monster's greatest weakness. He is deathly afraid of fire. Fire was the method by which he experienced his first death at the hands of angry villagers, and ever since then, he has an uncontrollable fear of its presence. It's also worth noting that the monster of Frankenstein, at least in his youth, lacked a lot of basic education. He lacked basic skills like speaking and reasoning. This isn't to say that he generally lacks intelligence. Over time, over the years, he did learn. He just didn't have the opportunity to learn yet. As of the current interpretation of the character, he has a complete basic education. He's a very well-rounded individual with opportune reasoning skills. He understands concepts like literature, mathematics, and he has also developed enough social skills to be able to interact with humans. Now, okay, so that brings us to the book in question. Unlike Tomb of Dracula, this isn't sort of like a remake or a retelling or a reimagining in any capacity. This shoots to be like a straight interpretation of the novel. Or at least as close as a comic book can get to it. So let's get into it and see how they did. The story opens with Dr. Frankenstein on an expedition which is lost in the Arctic wastes. He is searching for the hidden corpse of his monster, but he hasn't told any of his crew about their goal. They only know that Frankenstein is sort of a madman. It seems that the blood is starting to boil amongst the crew, who believe that Frankenstein is chasing ghosts and has brought them all there to die. They have a mutiny which results in an ice break, which frees the monster. They bring the monster back to their ship, where they stow it away for safekeeping. Everybody in the crew wants to know what it is, so finally Frankenstein gives in and retells his origin as a scientist. In his youth, Frankenstein set out to become the greatest doctor man had ever known. He left for college and devoted himself deeply into his studies. He would eventually uncover the secrets behind life and death. However, his thirst for knowledge would eventually become a thirst for power, and Frankenstein set out to apply his knowledge in a new form. He began harvesting body parts from graves and cadavers in order to build what he conceived to be the ultimate organism. Unfortunately, when Frankenstein finally birthed his creation, he was immediately horrified at what he had done. The creature's first eerie movements signaled a period of glory, but also terror for the young doctor. He lived in fear of his creature, who stalked the house unable to speak or reason. The creature was lost to him, unable to communicate, and seeking knowledge that Frankenstein could not give. It seemed almost like an animal, alone and in pain. The creature reached for Frankenstein, and in terror he lashed back with a chair, striking the monster. Having experienced violence for the first time, the monster lashed out and Frankenstein ran far away until he couldn't run any longer. Frankenstein collapsed from exhaustion and was eventually found by a friend and given some shelter. He awakens after his recovery only to discover that something terrible has happened. His younger brother has been mysteriously murdered. Frankenstein immediately leaves to go home, having suspected that the monster may be behind the murders, but after having spoken to his family, he discovers that the ward of the house, a young girl, has been charged with the crimes. Unfortunately, Frankenstein decides to once again run away from this problem. He allows the young ward to die and leaves home to escape into the Alps, where he wishes only to be left alone. Fortunately, the monster has been following him this whole time and is now ready to enact its revenge. The monster corners him in a cave and demands justice from Frankenstein, but he is nothing more than a man, and he cowers in fear. The creature, which has now learned to speak, scolds Frankenstein on his poor choices, and he lashes out with a flaming stick trying to kill the monster. The monster is too powerful, however, and it pins Frankenstein against the wall and forces him to listen. The flashback is interrupted, however, when a sudden thunderstorm smashes into the boat. All hands are on deck trying to keep the ship from going topside. Just then, a lamp comes loose and smashes into the monster's icy cage, melting it down and freeing the monster. We close the story on his clenched fist, slowly coming to life with righteous fury against his creator. Just in case you didn't see it, there was a little tagline at the end, warning us about the next issue, which features the bride of Frankenstein. In the original novel, that is something that happened. The monster requests that Frankenstein creates him a bride, but it doesn't go very well. We'll probably get into that at some point. Ultimately, I actually really like this book. I think it's an excellent interpretation of the source material. It gets most of the events of the novel correctly. Of course, this is only half of it. It's been condensed, though, to fit inside of a comic book. So it's actually a two-parter. I think the next issue featuring the Bride of Frankenstein will be the second part. I'm not complaining. I think the outcome is spectacular. I'm enthralled by this story. I love the art. It's incredible. I want to read on, but unfortunately, I don't have time to finish the whole book. The next issue is going to have to wait for another video. But that's all for this video. If you liked reading this comic with me and you want to read more, go ahead and subscribe. And if you want to support me, I've left some links in the description where you can do that. But yeah, until next time, keep reading comics.